Hello and welcome to the Uplifting Impact Podcast. I'm Justin Ponder, Chief Information Officer for Uplifting Impact.
And hello, everyone. I'm Maura Ramsey, and I am the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Associate Consultant here at Uplifting Impact.
And we're here today with Maura Packham, and we are so excited to have a conversation about all things DEI, leadership, and life. Maura Packham is Senior Vice President at Quad, a global marketing experience company headquartered in southeastern Wisconsin. She's responsible for advancing Quad's ESG strategy as a business imperative, which includes building a more comprehensive and sustainable diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy.
Yeah, and I think as cool as that sounds, something that's even cooler about Maura is that she proudly serves on the board of directors in Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Task Force for the Milwaukee Symphony Orchestra, which is really cool. I'm interested to hear more about that. And the Milwaukee chapter of the Brand Lab, which is an organization dedicated to changing the face and voice of the marketing industry by exposing young people from diverse ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds to viable creative careers. And just to throw in a little razzle dazzle for some more fun facts about Maura, is that she's a huge fan of the musician and artist Prince. So welcome to the show, Maura. We're so excited to have you.
Thank you so much, Tamara. Thank you so much, Justin. I really appreciate this opportunity. I love you both, and I look forward to this conversation. And I'm going to add to your fun fact, because it's not just that I'm a super fan of Prince, but I actually had the opportunity. So Prince passed away, as we all know, in 2016. And right after that, I had the opportunity to actually wear his white lace gloves from the Purple Rain tour, right,
Whoa.
Justin? I know that was a secret I was keeping from you, but it was just an opportunity. We had a meeting, that someone was there who's a music memorabilia, and knew I was a Prince fan, and I was able to, and they were so tiny, and it was just an incredible emotional moment. So,
sure. Do you feel the power flow through you? Yeah.
I will tell you, it was emotional. It came right over me. I mean, it was right after, he died on, I think it was April 16th, and it was right after that. So we were all, everyone was going through such an emotion of, the person that we lost. And, but yeah, I've always been a fan, and I find great inspiration. He sits right here on my left on my inspiration board. I'm not kidding you. Yes. And find great inspiration from his innovation and creativity. So my current anthem is Stand Up and Be Strong, which just came out. If you haven't listened to it, Justin, Tamara, you need to listen to it, but just came out of the vault, and it's on Welcome to America. So that's the first action item. There you go.
So what is it about Prince that draws so much of your attention? You mentioned innovation and creativity and everything, but what was it about Prince that makes him stand out for you so much?
Thank you for asking. The music since my high school days has just filled my soul in such an amazing way. And then as I got older and matured, and Prince just kind of came along with me, and that spirit of innovation, the confidence that he's so cool. Right.
Yeah.
Come on, right? That confidence, owning the situation, it just really inspired me. And I found, just on my journey, songs that would speak to me. Another one of my favorites is, Sometimes It Snows in April. And if people haven't listened to that, it was on the Parade album. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful song about the passing of life. So
yeah.
So
it's fantastic. And you started mentioning a little bit about your journey, and like you mentioned how Prince helped you get there. But can you tell us a little bit more? We read your bio and all the interesting things that you've done. Can you tell us a little bit more about your career path, kind of like your story, and really kind of like what started you, especially in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, happy to. So I'm born and raised in Boston, big Irish Catholic family, love them all. And, had a childhood that, we didn't really talk a lot about racial inequity, gender inequity, right? We just didn't. Not to say that, it was a bad family, good family. It's just, how I was raised. And as I went through, my journey in Boston, very, very proud that I started working at 14, and I've never stopped working. It's a passion of mine. and also went to school, UMass Boston, where I had an internship program, and that really opened me up, to a whole bunch of opportunity, and worked full time, through that whole time. And that really led me down the path of accounting and finance, loving it. And there's no job that I have had that I haven't loved. And I've been blessed to work for some amazing people that have just encouraged me to, it's like they saw something that I didn't see in myself. And, long story short, get to 2010 and living in Boston. I have 3 boys and a husband, and Quad acquired the company I was working for. And I came out to Milwaukee. I really knew nothing about Milwaukee, and I fell in love with the people. I fell in love with the people at Quad, the opportunity, and it was just the right step for my family. And so we moved in 2010. And I would like to tell you, Tamara and Justin, that, when we moved our family, you do your research and you're looking at neighborhoods. And I would like to tell you that we led with really looking at the demographics of Milwaukee and the neighborhood we were looking at. And we didn't. We weren't there yet in our journey. And so moving to one of the most segregated cities in America really impacted us. You could feel it. You could feel it in the church as you went to, in the grocery store, the school that your kids went to. So after a few years, you start thinking, how am I influencing this?
Absolutely. Like cooperating, participating in it.
Right. And so it was really through my faith. I belong to a church here in Brookfield, and we have an amazing pastor who was doing a lot of racial justice work. And one day she just asked for five volunteers to join a bunch of churches in Milwaukee to talk about racism. And that was like 2015, 2016. And there was something that just made my hand raise. And I'll be honest, I had no right. I had no,
whose hand is this going up?
Deep education. And that hand went up. And that really was a pivot point for me in my journey. And I met people who beautifully and lovingly helped me understand my privilege and helped me understand how I could use that privilege to help so many. And out of that came such great curriculum, from a faith-based, perspective. And then you fast forward to 2020 when George Floyd was murdered. And like every organization, right, you take stock. You say, okay, what are we doing? What can we do more? You have companies who came out and said all these things, super proud of the organization, because we came out and we said, we're going to invest in ourselves. We're going to do the work. We're going to partner with our communities. We're going to be transparent. And we have done just that. And so to work in an organization and partner with all sorts of people, my role didn't exist then, right? There were people who were passionate about this work. We brought in experts, like yourself, to help us along our journey and really learn from that journey. So that's it in a nutshell.
I love how you mentioned, too, that sometimes when we're in an environment, we can be passive contributors to the way that things are, even if we're not saying anything or not doing anything or not educating ourselves, we're in a way still contributing to those systems that exist. And so it's so funny how you feeling led in church, can I get an amen, raising your hand in church,
right.
Put you on this path of doing DEI work and kind of set the trajectory for the next couple of years of your professional and your personal life. And I think that's amazing how one small hand raise can really change.
You are so right, Tamara.
What life looks like.
And that's a message for everyone listening. It's like at some point, something is going to cross you, and just take that chance, just raise that hand. And it has changed my life. The other thing, and I'd be remiss not to talk about it, that changed my life as it relates to my DEI work, in July of 2019. So right, before George Floyd was murdered, I had an accident where I fell off a dock while I was on vacation with my family. Wow. And I hit my head in shallow water on a rock. And, so very long story short, as you peel back the onion, right, as you get through your post-concussion traditional symptoms of, light sensitivity and nausea and vertigo, I was left with still being on medical leave, there's something wrong with me. And it was really 3 years ago this month that I was diagnosed with hyperacusis, which is a very rare sound sensitivity disorder. And in a nutshell, it's my brain, my auditory center perceives sound differently than you both do. And so that everyday sounds of running water, a car, a refrigerator, dishwasher was my arch enemy, creates a very big change in your life. And I can honestly say that was a moment that I felt excluded, right? Because it's all sound, right? And so in those early days, just surrounding yourself with people, leaning in, just standing up to the status quo, right? Stand up and be strong. We opened with that. Really led me down to a path to say, we all of us possess the ability to create change in our lives. And I did the work, and I was well supported by my family, by the organization, incredible support. And I've learned to use my tools and really just acclimate differently to life. And part of the power, part of the silver lining, and there's a silver lining in everything that hits us, right? When you look for that silver lining, the silver lining in this case was because you're quiet, because you're very quiet, you create capacity to read, to dive in. And for me, at that particular time in my journey, I really dove in on two things. One was strategy, right, as it relates to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The other one was ESG, but it was also diving in to become a better ally of what you're not, right? Yeah. To read copious amounts, biographies, stories, James Baldwin, Nina Simone.
Yes.
I went deep in Stonewall, right, to learn about people like Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, people that started the trans rights movement, to just understand a lived experience that was not my own. And that all happened during that quiet period. So that's another message of really look for the silver lining, and how when you face these opportunities, I tell everyone it's not a challenge, it's an opportunity. Pivot to the opportunity. Great things will come from it.
And you mentioned in there, like, kind of how the opportunity to read more and to write more. And then you mentioned also ESG. For our listeners who might not be aware of what that is, can you tell us a little bit more about what ESG reporting is?
Yes. So ESG, let's start at a very high level, right? So we have environmental, social, and governance. And really, in a very simplistic form, think of ESG as a strategic framework to look at the material challenges that are facing the organization and coming up with solutions that are going to help our employees, our business, our community, our clients. This has become an increasingly important strategy from an employee perspective, from a client, from an investor perspective. And the key word in what I said is the material challenges, right? And the material challenges facing Quad are very different than material challenges facing other organizations, and how we get to those.
Can you say that again about how it's different at different places? Because lots of times when we work with people, like, well, tell us the out of the box, like, just give us the box package, like what's worked over there.
There's no out of the box. And here's why. Because to do it right, you have to listen. You have to go out and you have to talk to employees. So we surveyed our employees, we surveyed our clients, we listened to feedback from the investor community to say, what are the few material challenges facing us that are important to you, and they help drive our success and strategy as a marketing experience company. So let me give you an example. Some of those challenges that we heard are, how are you caring for our data and security? How are you ensuring that discrimination does not live within your organization? How are you ensuring that you're putting the right training in for compliance and safety? And DEI was one of those areas of opportunity, right? Yeah. How are you creating a strategy to create a more inclusive environment? So DEI, not only is it like absolutely part of social, we believe it's actually the let's call it a superpower that drives your success across all ESG, right? Because it's about people, and it's about creating that safety, belonging, and mattering so people feel the trust, right? You have to earn trust. And when you have that, they lean in and they will do things to solve those material challenges that we have. So it's really been, and we published, very proud of the work that we've done, because part of this is a narrative that's both qualitative and quantitative. Mm-hmm. And we published our first ESG report, even though Quad has had a long history, especially in environmental, over 50 years, right? Of dedicated service to being better, finding a better way. This was our first ESG report, and we published it at the end of 2021, and we just did an update in 2022. And why that's important is part of that framework is, what do you believe? Right? Yes. So we published 20 commitments to say, here are challenges, material challenges, here's the framework, and then we commit to being better in these areas. So those 20 challenges for our environment, right? So it's things like hazardous waste and recycling and how we're protecting our forests. And then there's 16 that are in social. And in those social, there's 5 dedicated to DEI, right? Yes. So we committed to bolstering and strengthening our business resource group program. We committed to bringing inclusion into our performance reviews. We committed to improving representation for all employees and from management, both from a gender and from a race and ethnicity perspective. So I hope that helps sort of set that. Here's the framework and here's how DEI connects right into it.
No, I think that gives us a lot of stuff to think about, 1. And 2, I love how you kind of emphasize the importance sometimes of us being quiet. I mean, you talked about it in 2 cents, like for you personally in your personal life, but also the importance of being quiet in your organization and when you're trying to build out these strategies and giving other people the opportunity to talk and just listening and hearing that feedback from your team in order to come up with strategies that are most beneficial for your specific organization. And so beyond all of these high-level things that you've been doing, what are some of the ways that you're learning to practice micro inclusions on your own and in your everyday life?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll answer that through our strategy, because thinking about micro inclusion, exclusionary behavior is so fundamental to our strategy in DEI, right? So we start at a very high level with 3 areas of focus. And that first is, let's create some language, some dialogue, some education, right? And we do that through a number of different ways, right? We've created a wonderful learning program, and that's where we have partnered with Uplifting Impact in a beautiful way. And thank you for all of your support there. But we've also created a communication platform. Well, it goes both ways. We've created a communication platform where employees can go and, based on their self-paced learning, find a place for them. And a huge part of that strategy is also our community partnerships, right? We are nothing without our community partnerships. And you talked to Maura about listening. That is fundamental to what we're doing with our community partnerships, to listen to a lived experience that may be different than yours. And then how does that influence how we hire, how we onboard employees, how we do performance reviews, and even how we retire employees. The second area of focus, and this is what you asked specifically, is intentional inclusion, right? Because that word intentional is so important. We're building a muscle. We haven't figured this all out yet.
We haven't figured it out yet.
We haven't figured it out yet, right? We say DEI is a journey, right? Without destination. It's a sentence without a period, right? So intentional inclusion begins with understanding cultural difference. And if you asked me, a huge differentiator, it is that. It is taking a pause point, right, through the Intercultural Development Inventory, or IDI, to really take time, do that self-work, right? With 1,500 leaders that have gone through it, to say, how do you accept culture that's different than yours? And this isn't a bad thing, good thing. This is not about shaming. This is about bringing people in a safe environment to say we're all in a different journey, right? Are you denial, polarization? Are you minimization? Are you accepting and adaptation? And all of that has been fundamental to creating inclusion. A big part of the other area there is our business resource groups. We have 6 of them. And our last area, our third pillar, which we hold sacred, is measurement. Right, is measurement. How are we right?
The joke is, because normally we think about this as like an emotional thing, and it's almost like sometimes there's something in our brain that says, well, surely if we can measure it, if we can quantify it, it somehow takes away from the quality of the qualitative. But like, what are the importance of measurement? Like, and how do you measure inclusivity? What would you say?
Well, thank you for raising that. I mean, first we acknowledge there's an absolute moral imperative to this work, right? Mm-hmm. Absolutely. But we're a business, right? So there's a business imperative to this work as well. And when we talk about resistance to the work and what have you, part of the strategy is leaning in to what people are already doing, the strategies that people are already working on, to not make DEI separate, to make it part of what they're already doing. So you'd be hard pressed to say to anybody, are you thinking about strategies to retain employees? Are you thinking about, right? Think about the economy where we are. How are you thinking strategically about acquiring new talent into the organization? How are you thinking strategically about bringing new clients into the business? So the more we can lean in and show how DEI is part of those strategies, then, we get more people into the work. And because we've grown up, it's in our lifeline, right? As a company, we measure every input and output, right, for this organization. DEI is no different, right? We take that same vigor and rigor and we apply it to DEI, right? So let's look at our onboarding. Let's look and see our data quarter over quarter about the interviews that we're having, the advertisements that we're placing, who we're bringing in to interviewing, how we're hiring, who's joining our BRGs, who's signing up for our benefits program, right? So we have a dashboard that we look at quite often, and a big wrapper on all of that, and I've mentioned it already, is representation. Being comfortable sharing the data, right? I'm so proud of the organization to just say, this is a starting point. This is a place where we build from, right? And all of these strategies help us improve that data point. And we also have a task force that holds us accountable, right? So we implemented that last year, and
which is huge. Having the external force, like even if we're just an individual, we don't have the high level resources that you're discussing. Even just on our own, like having the accountability partner who can step outside of your own perspective, like, hey, remember that thing you said you were going to do?
That's right.
And how do you see that translating to like your individual life? Like if we have somebody who's maybe, let's say they're retired and they're not involved with an organization and they're not volunteering, but they want to become a more inclusive person. Like, how would you think about these ideas of accountability and measuring and being able to even report out? If I'm part of an organization that does not do any of those things, or I have no say in those things, or I'm not working outside of the home, how might those translate to like me as an individual? Like, how can I... And I don't know. I don't have any ideas. So it's a brainstorming session here about how we can make those same things that drive success on an organizational level: accountability, metrics, measurements, and reporting out to others. How might that translate to individual life? I'm going to
tell you something, Justin, because you're hitting it, right? In this journey of that task force, right, and building, at some points last year, we brought over 100 employees into this work. What do you think the conversations were like in the beginning when you would say, hey, I think you'd be great on this task force? Some of the conversations were, are you talking to me? I don't know. I don't know enough. I don't have a certificate. I don't know enough. It's like, I think you might know enough, and just helping people find their confidence and making that environment so comfortable that they're finding their voice, they're leaning in, they're coming with ideas. No ideas are bad ideas. Now, we can't do everything, right? So we have to prioritize and, what have you. But that cascades to a personal life, right? In your personal life, wherever you are. I opened with my story with my church. Right? That cascaded into our family, right? Having conversations with my husband and my children that we weren't having before, reading books, watching movies, watching, podcasts, like just getting involved in such a beautiful way. And part of the measurement that we don't talk about is that in between, is those discussions that you have, the proud moments with those very same people who a year ago might have said, I don't think I belong. They are the champions of the work. They are out. They're talking to their leaders within their departments and their brands, and they're saying, here's what we're working on. Here's how we can get more people involved. And that is pure joy right there.
It's almost like you want that reluctant leader. Like you want the person who's, I don't know enough, because it shows that prerequisite of the intellectual humility that makes them open to listen. There's actually, so all you people out there listening, so, oh my goodness, Maura is so intimidating. And she's awesome. But I think that you've invited us. Yes, absolutely. But I think you've done an awesome job of saying like, hey, precisely the people that you've looked out for are the people that I don't know this. Good. That means you'll be in a position to listen, as opposed to the people like, oh yeah, I got this. They're not going to listen because they already know. Tamira knows this, right?
Well, exactly. And then you have people who I don't want to be part of that. I mean, I think that's the other, like, we have to acknowledge not everyone is on the same journey, right? And at Quad, we say, that's okay, right? That is okay. And we're just figuring it out as we go. But you're hitting it. I mean, it's been such a beautiful opportunity to just get to know people, watch their confidence build, and set up the framework. I think that's important. It's not just willy-dilly ideation. We have 9 strategy teams. It's very well organized, really, to look at reviewing policy, to reviewing onboarding, reviewing how we're recruiting, reviewing how we create dialogue. So that part is very rigid, but how it works underneath is very organic, which is just beautiful. And then we add expertise. We do have expertise, right? So we augment with bringing people in because it's so important to all of us in our learning journey.
Yeah, and I think something that you highlighted too that really stuck out to me is how DEI education actually gives us confidence in our work. So you talked about, the IDI and doing that self-inventory. So not just organizational strategies, but as individuals and doing that individual inventory to figure out, where am I at? If I don't understand it, at least I have a little bit of language to now know, where am I at on my DEI journey? What do I know? I might surprise myself and figure out what I might know or what I might not know. But having that opportunity to sit back and reflect and to think about where you are, and then using that as your confidence booster as you start to do this work, because then now I have language, right? Like I have the language to identify my behaviors, and I have an idea of what my go-to is when interacting with different people and different topics and different strategies. And so I think the fact that you highlighted the importance of that individual inventory along with organizational inventory is something that I feel like a lot of people need to hear, right? It's really beneficial for us as people, but also for our organization.
Thank you for saying that. And I'm going to add something that I just went over very quickly. However, I think it's incredibly important. Inclusion is part of everyone's role and responsibility at Quad. And that message comes from the very top and cascades. To your question about how do we hold people accountable? How do we measure? Last year, we brought inclusion in as a competency in our performance reviews. And we didn't just add a new, we were purposeful. We got a beautiful group of people together, to say, let's look at each competency through a DEI lens. Let's look at, is there bias there? How can we reduce subjectivity, increase objectivity? Think about language, right? Put it through a gender decoder. And then, yes, we added inclusion, and we did a lot of education internally. We just started to say everyone at the company is going to have an inclusion goal, right? And then as we do our performance reviews, which we're doing right now for 2022, you will be reviewed from a competency that includes inclusion. And so really breaking down and making sure they have the toolkit to create inclusion the way that works for them, right? And that is a whole variety of things, right? But at the very top it is, as you said, Tamara, it's culture, right? How can we help people shift that perspective? Be curious, not shut down when you're with someone that's different
and everything
right?
else, right?
Not minimize, but how can you be curious? What are the 3 questions that we can give you to help you engage and expand your worldview? And so that's been a beautiful journey. And, hats off to our HR team. A lot of people involved in doing that, but that's across the entire org. And we're just getting started, in that. So.
And it's a shame that we're just getting started here. This has been a great conversation. And you mentioned it being a beautiful journey. This conversation has been a beautiful journey as well. And if I could, I'll briefly recap some of the highlights that we've talked about. So first off, we talked about the awesomeness of Prince and the confidence he embodied. And I also like the idea of raising a hand and stepping outside of your comfort zone. You talked about your story. And you also talked about, with so much generosity and courage, thank you for that, about the silver lining of experiencing hyperacusis and turning that into an opportunity to read more, which developed your love of ESG reporting and being intentional about inclusion, and so challenging all of us out there with the power of listening. And in there, you mentioned this really profound moment about the power of listening, because it gives people, it might be anxiety producing for us. It might cause us lots of trepidation and concern because it's going to get messy. We don't have a plan. But when we listen, we create the opportunity to help people find their confidence, like Prince.
Yeah, it's listening is a superpower. It is something that I'll be honest. I mean, we're all on a journey, and I through this journey that I've personally been on, when you're quiet, right, sound, you really look at nonverbal cues, right? You're watching a person, you're looking at the eyes, like I'm looking at your eyes right now, and you're listening. And it's not listening to think about my response to you. No, it's deep
That's
listening.
That's a hard one.
It is hard, and we have to practice, right? But it's listening so the person exhausts themselves. We are so polarized right now, right? To allow someone to just get whatever it is, and you listen without critique, rebuttal, worrying about your response. What does it make that person feel?
Right.
It makes them feel seen and heard and valued. And that is profoundly moving. So listening is a huge part of this work.
Thanks, Maura, so much for just your time today. I think we all can agree that we need you to come back because we love having this conversation with you.
I love you too. It's a mutual love. It's a mutual love.
With you and just hearing your passion behind the work that you're doing, and you can see your heart through all of it. And it's so beautiful to watch you step into this role and do this work for your community. And if the listeners of the Uplifting Podcast enjoyed this podcast, feel free to continue to listen to our podcast, subscribe to our podcast, wherever you get podcasts. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you have something you want to share with us, feel free to hit us up on LinkedIn as well. I'm sure we'll have plenty of clips there too.
Love it.
Can't get enough of Maura, like we can't get enough of Maura, feel free to continue to listen and look out for her as well.
So Tamara invited our listeners to hit us up. Maura, how could our listeners get in contact with you?
Oh, best way is LinkedIn. Yeah. Just jump on LinkedIn. That's the best way, and would love feedback. And I thank you for this opportunity. I mean, you both bring me so much joy, and it's just been a wonderful, wonderful conversation.
Well, thank you very much, Maura. And we'll have all that information in the notes. So thank you very much, Maura, for your time.
Thank you.
And thank you to all of you out there listening. We're so glad that you tuned in to this week's episode of the Uplifting Impact Podcast. And we need more people to help us uplift the impact. In order to do so, be sure to share this episode, comment on it by going to our website at upliftingimpact.com, or provide your thoughts directly to us through LinkedIn at Uplifting Impact, Justin Ponder, Tamira Ramsey, and Deanna Singh. Until next week, keep uplifting the impact.